What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to the workshop. Now this is going to be the first in a series of videos of this resin table build, and today in this project we want to get our router sled built so we can have a flattening jig to flatten our live edge slab. We're going to cut out our live edge slab, we're going to prepare it, and we're hopefully going to get it flattened all in this video. So build a router sled and flatten a live edge slab. That's what this first video is going to be. Now I've got myself a new track saw, so I'm going to be using this to build the router sled. I will do a review and reasons why I went for the Bosch track saw in a later video. I've also been sent some more pigments and stuff from MID Glass Fibre Supplies. So check out those guys at glassfibre.ie. I'll show you that in this video as well. And I've been playing around with some of the pigments, and let's see if we get the camera to focus on this. That's the kind of effect that I'm hoping to go for. So we're going to go for a copper resin pour, and we're going to have this nice swirl pattern. So this is a mixture of two different colors. So it's a polished copper solid color, and it is then a metallic powder, copper powder. So I'll show you that in this video as well. So for now, we need to get this router sled built, and we need to pick out the section of slab that we're going to use. So let's get on it and get this project started. Right guys, this is the piece of oak that I've shown you in a previous video that we're going to use. So it's the one with the rot in it and the holes that we're going to hope to fill with the resin. Now I've just built a frame. It is 3 by 2, so it's 3 foot by 2 foot. That's the size of the coffee table that I want to end up with. So I just built a little rough frame out of 2 by 1 lat prepared timber, just so I can place this over this timber, see what way I want to cut it out, and see what way my table is going to end up. So the biggest problem I have with this board is going to be this piece here, I reckon. This is where a branch kind of snapped and I'm left with all this brittle timber. And so I think I want to take this section out. So if I overlay it here, something like that, I want to include these two holes in the table. So I want to keep them. So I'm laying the frame something like that. So this would be the table. So I'll have copper resin here and in this corner, and then we'll fill these two. I think that's how we're going to go. And if I cut across here, then that gets rid of all this section that could cause me problems later in the build. So something maybe like that, just so we can even up the copper pour on either side. I think roughly that will be the shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop this slab straight across here. I'm going to keep all this section. We're going to flatten all this section. Then we can make the final decision on that. But it's handy just to build a frame to lay over your live edge slab, just to see what way it's going to line out. So I think this is more or less the final one we're going to go for, but I'm going to cut it straight across here to start with, and we'll flatten this entire section, and then we can make that final decision. But that's just a handy way of doing it. Just make yourself a little frame, and then you can kind of picture it there in front of you. I'm also going to build the flattening jig on top of this table. So this is my assembly table. It's kind of a melamine top on it. It's made from like inch MDF, so it's good and solid, it's good and flat, and we can build our flattening jig on top of this table. So let's get on it. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is get this slab cut down to size. I'm just going to use a track saw now and chop this pieces off that I don't need. I have it roughly marked out now, the size that I want, so we'll get it to its rough dimensions and it'll be a little bit more manageable. So we have a bit of noise and a bit of dust to make now, so let's do it. Okay, there's our slab roughly cut down to size now, so it's roughly dimensioned. And I have to say the ease at which that Bosch saw went through this oak, it was like butter. It didn't even feel like it was cutting through it. It's a pretty powerful 1400 watt motor that comes with that track saw, which is one of the reasons I got it. And it has a silky smooth cut, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, let's get on now preparing this slab. So we've got a lot of bark to remove, a lot of all brittle rot that we have to take out, so we have to make sure that all these loose bits are completely taken off it now when we get it cleaned up. So let's do that. Okay, so I've done a basic cleanup on the slab. I'll do some more when I get it flattened, but for now we're going to start on the router sled. So I want to build the side rails that the sled is going to run on. So they're going to be 4 inches high, 100 millimeters. So I'm going to cut 2 cuts out of this 3/4 inch or 18 millimeter WBP ply to make my sides. So 2 runs down, I can cut them exactly in half, then that'll fit on top of my assembly table, so we should be good to go. So again, it's just 2 4-inch cuts and cut them in half and we can build our sides. So let's get on it. Right, there's our 200 millimeter or 4-inch sections cut. So we'll take them to the miter saw now and chop them in half. We can screw them together to make our side rails for our sled. I have to say, the track saw makes breaking down sheets so much easier, and get perfect straight cuts with jointable edges is fantastic. The only awkward thing I'm finding is the cords and the dust extraction. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty good. Right, we're on to making the side walls of our router sled. Now you just saw me chop these in half, but the 2 upright pieces that our sled is going to slide on, I'm going to make sure that I make them out of the one piece. So this is the piece that was cut in half. So I'm guaranteed that they are the exact same dimensions. So it's going to be nice and easy. We're just going to glue and screw these together in an L shape like that. Now this plywood is slightly cupped. You can see there's a bit of flex in that. So when I'm screwing, I just have to be 100% certain that I've pushed this flat against the table, get some glue and get some screws in it, nice and simple. So just make sure you make your 2 top runners out of the same piece so that you're guaranteed they are the same thickness. Let's get on it. Right, there we go. That's exactly how it's going to work. So we have our 2 side walls in place. So these will get clamped to the top of the bench. We'll keep them perfectly parallel. So now we just need to make the base of our sled, and that's going to be exactly 3 feet, which will overhang each side wall by 3 inches. So we need to make it 3 foot in length, and we're going to make the base of it just a little bit wider than the base of our router. So let's get on and cut that now. Okay, this is the next cut we're going to make. This is the bottom of our router sled. So we want to make it just a couple of mil wider than the actual base of the router itself, just so it can slide up and down between the 2 walls. It'll all make sense in a minute. But when you're measuring it, make sure and allow for the curve of your blade, because if you just leave it a couple of mil wider, the curve of your blade will take away that couple of mil on you, and then it will be the exact width of the router and it'll get wedged in your sled, and you don't want that. So allow a couple of mil and then a couple of mil for your blade as well, and that should give you the perfect thickness for your base. So this is the next cut I'm going to make. I need a 3 foot section out of this, so one of the pieces will make one of the side walls, and then we might have to just do another cut to make the other side wall. So I get on that now and do it. Okay, there is our router sled essentially made. We just have to put a slot in the bottom of it now before we screw it together. So it's essentially just a box the same width as the base of your router, so your router can slide up and down it. This box then will sit on the edges of our sled, essentially the guide rails, and we put 2 runners screwed to the bottom of this that will catch each side of the rail. It's nice and simple, and you'll see it all coming together now. So before we screw this all together, we need to cut a channel out of the bottom of this so that our router bit can run up and down in that channel. So let's get on that. Okay, in order to cut this slot, I've just drilled 2 30mm holes either end of my base. Now I measured in the distance to where I wanted my router to stop. Obviously this will be a different measurement depending on what size you build your sled, but that's where I wanted to stop. So I'm just going to use a track saw now to give me a straight line between these 2 holes, and that will give me a wide enough slot for my router bit to run in. And if I want to get a bigger milling router bit, I should be able to fit in that 30mm slot as well. So let's get on this. There we go, nice and simple. Doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to work. Right, so I went ahead and assembled the sled. So again, it's just a case of glue and screw. Very, very simple. So most of the work was already done. So there's the base. You can see there's our slot. I just screwed on 2 runners made from 2x1 lats either side. They will catch our rails either side, sit down on it. I just lubricated it with a bit of beeswax just to allow that to sit and slide. So you can see that slides up and down nicely, and our router will sit in here. And we can slide that back and forward, ensuring that we stay level and parallel the whole way across. So that's it, nice and simple. Now, one little thing, the sides I made 100mm or 4 inches. They might be a little on the high side because the depth of my plunge is not going to get me all the way down into my slab. But I have 2 boards here, which I have left over from the main sheet of 3/4 inch ply. I can slide them in between the 2 rails. That will lift up my slab and will give me a nice flat bottom to reference from. So I can slide in 2 of these if I need to. So that's it, ready to go. There's not much more to it than that. So now we have to look at flattening this slab. Now, there's a couple of different approaches we could take to this, but we'll look at the shape of this slab, see how we're going to do it, because we don't want to waste material. And if you don't set your slab up right, you could end up taking off way too much material off one side to get it level and parallel with the other side. I'll show you what I mean now. So we're going to look at flattening this slab now, and like I said, we have to try and think about how we're going to set this slab up so that we don't remove too much material. Now at the minute you can see that this part is nice and stable, nice and flat, and our edge is actually nice and flat on our table here. So there's not much to do in this area, but the board then begins to rise up, so I can actually fit my fingers underneath this end. Now if I was to flatten this, so if I was to draw a line with my laser right across there, by the time I got to the end of this board, I would nearly be the whole way through this board. So you can see if I push on it, we have a high spot right about here. So the thing we're going to have to do is flip this over. It's caught in the hole there, there we go. And take down this high spot right here first. So this is the first thing we're going to flatten, is this. Once we get this high spot down, we should bring both these ends closer to the table. They will sit more or less then in the same plane, so this will drop down, and then we can begin to flatten this slab. Because if I went to flatten it like this, with this up in the air so much, like I say, I would end up taking nearly 2 inches off this, which would bring this down to less than 1 inch, and I'd have 2 inches down here, so that'd be no good. So we have to kind of think about how you're going to flatten your slab. And we also have a high section rising up here, which we'll have to address as well. So the first thing we're going to do, take the high point out of the back, turn it around this side and begin flattening it. So let's do that. Okay, we're set up, ready to go. I've put in one of the boards to raise this up 3/4 inch, so you can see that high point now is just about touching the bottom of my sled. My sled just barely passes over it. So I'm going to work, just take down this high point, flip it over, try and take down the high points on the other side. That should save as much of the material as I can. So let's get cracking. I have a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch router bit in this. I wanted to get a bigger milling bit, but I couldn't get one in time, so we're using a 1/2 inch bit, and we don't have, it's not a huge board, so we'll just take our time. It's going to be a lot of noise and a lot of dust, so let's get our dust mask on and let's get cracking. Right, so there's that high point taken off. So the bottom of this now is relatively flat. Relatively, it's still humps and hollows and stuff, but that big high spot now is taken down. So we're going to flip this back over, sit it the other way around, and then take the high spots off the far side. And then what we might do, once that's done and this is sitting nice and flat, we might flatten the back this side because it's the flattest side. So we'll be removing the least amount of material on this to get it flat. And we flip that over, that can be our reference surface against our base. And we get the other side flattened. So now, flip this over, take off the high spots on the other side. Let's do that. Okay guys, we're in handheld mode. I just want to demonstrate this to you so you can see how much this side has come down. So you can remember I could fit my fingers underneath there. So we brought that down a lot. And if we go around the far side, we can see that this side is pretty flat to our board as well. So they're pretty similar now. So now I'm going to take down these big high spots. So we have a high spot here and on this side, and we have that big high spot down there, if you guys can just see it, that one that's jutting out. So we take that down so this is sitting relatively flat, and then we can flatten the underside of this. Okay guys, there we go. That's one side of this slab now completely flat. This is actually day 2, so it's the following day since the last time I spoke on the video. So there's a lot of work in this. It's very slow. Just got to take our time with it. Small cuts, light cuts is definitely the way to go. Light passes over and back. You might want to invest in a milling bit or a surfacing bit. The bit I have from my router is kind of small. It's about a 12 or 14 mil bit, and yeah, it's a lot of passes to take with such a small bit, so a surfacing bit or a milling bit for your router would be the way to go. Another thing, take plenty of breaks. Having a router in your hand for this length of time, for hours on end, the vibration is dangerous. Any tools that vibration, you keep in your hands for a long time, they can damage the nerve endings in your hand. So if you take your hand off a router and you've been using it for a few hours and you have a tingling in your hand, that's can lead to nerve damage. That's a sign that you've been holding on to that router for too long. So it's just something to think about. You can get what they call vibration white finger, where the nerve endings in your fingers start to die. Your fingers go white, and you don't want that happening. So take plenty of breaks and take it slow, and you get there. And just, again, eye up your slab, get it positioned right, and so you're not removing too much material. So that's that side done. I have a reference face that's good and flat. Now I want to establish a flat face that's parallel to this, so we can flip this over now and work the other side for another few hours. So let's crack on. Okay guys, there we go. We have a good flat live edge slab now. So flat both sides, and both sides are perfectly parallel. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of elbow grease. You're essentially turning yourself into a human powered CNC machine, and that router does take its toll on your hand when you're using it for that length of time. So I recommend, don't do what I did. Get yourself a proper bit. Maybe look for a milling bit or a slightly thicker bit, a longer one too, so you have the full range of adjustment from your router, and you can drop through your sled onto your slab, and you don't have to shim it up too much. But just bear in mind, you might have to shim it. Another thing, just be sure that you lock the slab down tight. So I have screws around all this, holding this slab in place so it can't move. Make sure it can't flex, because if it's flexing, then you're definitely not putting a straight edge or straight face on it. So just bear that in mind. Make sure it's good and locked down. And then it's just a case of take your time. Small passes, light cuts is the way to go. And just lots of passes on light cuts, and you'll get a pretty decent surface. So there we go. Now, the next thing we want to do is cut this roughly to its final shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. After we put the resin around it, then we can square it all up. But yeah, we cut this now to its final shape, and I think we're almost there for this video. Okay guys, this is roughly going to be the final shape, so we can kind of see what we're aiming for here now. So this is going to run from corner to corner, and we're going to put resin here and here, and you can see this lovely detail that we're going to have in it. What I'm thinking now is I'm going to fill this with the copper color resin both sides, maybe half fill the rot area, so where the hole is, and then finish it off with some clear resin on top, maybe just so you can see down into the depths of this, rather than putting an opaque resin the whole way to the top where it just fills the gaps. It'd be nice to see down and give the table a little bit of depth. So I think that's going to be the plan. So I'm just going to roughly mark this out now. It doesn't have to be perfect. This frame is not actually square, but I have a framing square here, and I'll use that to square up these edges. So I'm going to just get the track saw now and cut this. I'm going to stay outside these lines, and we'll cut back to these lines when the resin is done, when we want to square up the table and we have the top. So that's what it's going to be. I think that's going to be good. So let's get the track saw now and cut this roughly down to its final size. Right guys, there we go. Our slab is almost ready. So it's flattened and it's cut to shape. So we got a good bit done in this video. We built our router sled jig for flattening the slab. The slab is flat, cut to shape. It's almost ready to be put into the mold for the resin. We still have some tidying up to do, and we have to get some resin on the sides. I'll show you all that in the next video, how we prepare this slab to take the resin pour. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully this has been informative. Hopefully it's been useful to you. Hopefully you got some inspiration from it. If you have, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, guys. If you're new here, subscribe. Any comments or questions you have for me, be sure and leave them below. In the next video, we'll go through all the resin. I'll show you all the resin products that I have. I'll show you all the cool color pigments and stuff. I didn't have time to do it in this video because it's getting a bit long. That's all going to be the next video. We're going to build the mold to put our slab in. We're going to prepare the slab for our resin pour. It might be a 2-stage pour or even a 3-stage pour. I'm not sure yet, depending on how we're going to go with the copper and with the clear. So that's all to be decided and all to come up in this build. So I'm going to get out of here, guys. It's definitely time for a beer now, so I shall see you in the next one.